and welcome to the Ident Review, the show where we have a good look and chat about the various television idents that we have come to know and love over the years. And for this instalment, we're taking a look at the Christmas idents that represented Channel 4 from 1982 to 1995. Channel 4 debuted on the 2nd of November 1982, and being just over 1 month old, had to prepare for the Christmas television season. Its competitors, the BBC and ITV, had been on the air for decades and were consistently revamping their Christmas appearances every year. As the newcomer, Channel 4 would have to take great strides to ensure it stood out amongst the crowd. Now when it comes to Christmas 1982 on Channel 4, most people remember The Snowman, an animated adaptation of the Raymond Briggs children's book that is still shown today over 35 years later. But now let's take a look at our first ident of the day, the one that represented the new Channel 4 in Christmas of 1982.
This is Channel 4. Now Laurence Olivier stars as the evil crooked-backed king, Richard III.
Nice and simple to start off with. Nothing much has changed from the main ident of the time. The pieces of the multicoloured 4 still fly in to form the iconic numeral, although this time a Christmas bauble adorns the background, with the 4-score theme rejigged slightly to add some Christmassy instruments to it. Now I know a lot of Christmas idents, particularly on the BBC, were a lot more complex at this point in time, but for a channel that had only existed for a month, this isn't a bad effort, and back then I'm sure the wow factor of the computer-generated 4 hadn't worn off just yet. Moving on, shortly after turning 1 year old, let's have a look at Christmas offerings for 1983.
Good afternoon, this is Keith Harrison welcoming you to Christmas Eve on Channel 4.
Okay, honestly expected something a little bit more. Like the year before, it's remarkably simple. However, gone is the Christmassy background decorations and festive music. Instead, you now have the general 4-score music, the standard 4 numeral flying in, and the background is now just a series of glimmering stars? At least I think that's what they're going for. I must say, I would have just kept the 1982 variant if I knew this was going to be its intended replacement. It just seems a bit too lazy creatively, like they made the absolute minimum effort to make this stand out for viewers. However, each year is different, and I would show you what 1984 has to offer us, except I can't find any video footage of this ident. Seriously. For 1984, you'd think there would be something, but sadly there's nothing I can find. There are some pictures which I'll show you on screen, and as you can see, they actually seem to change things up a bit with the 4 taking on the form of a snowman. If anyone has or knows of the footage of this ident, please do let me know in the comments. Thankfully, footage of the Christmas 1985 ident still exists, so let's take a look at that one instead.
You know, I must confess that having seen programmes before they go out, I don't always sit glued to them when we're on air. But with this one, my eyes will be arrowdited to the screen. It's a celebration of that rarest of theatrical jewels, the perfect partnership of two great artists, Fontaine and Nureyev.
It seems Channel 4 was going for the budget savers back then. So like the previous ones, this is essentially just the main Channel 4 ident from the 1980s, except this time when the pieces land in the centre of the screen, the colours change from the rainbow style to more of a frozen look, which honestly as a logo does look quite nice. But again, I just wish there was something more. The fact is, it's simply the main sequence ever so slightly rejigged to me, and it gets old fast. And nice aesthetics aside, this one doesn't really do it for me. Now for Christmas 1986, I've read multiple accounts in terms of Christmas idents. Some say that there was no Christmas ident at all, and all the main 4 sequences just played as usual. Some say that the 1985 variant we've just looked at was used again, and some say it's just a regular sequence but with the Christmassy 4-score music. And that final description is exactly what Channel 4 did do for Christmas of 1987. Yep, no new ident, no attempt to do something stand out, they just used the standard sequence, slapped the Christmassy version of 4-score on it and called it done and dusted. How inspiring. Anyhow, let's move on to Christmas of 1988, where they actually did something different. Let's have a look.
A very British Brookside.
I know it's simple, but I think this may be my favourite so far. Honestly, I know it's the same iconic 4 numeral, but I love the multicoloured flashes of fireworks going on in the background. Here is a perfect example of simplicity being used to the best and fullest effect. It's different enough from the norm, it's bright, it's colourful, and ultimately memorable. Now, I've heard this first debuted for Guy Fawkes Night in November of 1988, but the fact they kept it on for Christmas shows that it proved impactful enough to retain. There are even some accounts that this was used occasionally during Christmas of 1990, so a winner on many fronts for me, and definitely my favourite Channel 4 Christmas ident of the 1980s. But now, let's close out the decade by looking at Channel 4's festive offering for 1989. Mixed feelings on this one. So I've heard this one referred to as Dark Angel, and honestly, there does seem an air of intrigue and mystery about it. It's not exactly what my mind would think when tasked with making a Christmas ident, but again, it's so different enough from the norm that it does stand out. It's darker, moodier, more enigmatic in a way. I wish the 4 numeral did more than simply phase in and out, but again, from a design standpoint, this one is very interesting. However, as this one closed off one decade, another would soon begin. So let's take a look at the Christmas ident for 1990.
Good evening, and welcome if you've just joined us on Channel 4, where television itself combines with the musical imagination of a master composer. A unique presentation now of Haydn's creation.
Well, I think there's some obvious standouts here. For starters, let's discuss the music. Once more, it's the classic 4-score track, but redone as sort of a church choir remix, and honestly, I quite like it. The harmonies are wonderful, and part of me wouldn't have minded if Channel 4 had adopted it as their main theme overall. The other big standout is the design. The 4 is now a shiny metallic sort of surface with various lights and reflections spanning off it, and again, I do quite like the design. It works as a Christmas ident, and like with the music, if this became a main Channel 4 ident aside of the festive special, I think it could have worked quite well. Let's progress on now with Christmas of 1991.
Christmas Day on 4, and now a celebration of the myriad of images and interpretations that surround the cult of the Virgin Mary.
Sadly, this one's a bit of a downstep for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've always liked Channel 4 in its early years to showcase its bright multicolours in their idents, but compared to variants like 1988 and 1990, this one falls back into coming across as lazy. It's just a bunch of flashing images and colours, which, yes, arguably the fireworks one from earlier is too. However, the fireworks variant worked for me because the way it was set up and was showcased was very visually appealing. This doesn't take that same form, and if anything, it's literally just flashing shapes and colours before zooming out into the 4, just not really engaging or memorable. Can Christmas 1992 do any better? Let's find out.
Now on 4, highlights of the 30th anniversary concert in honour of Bob Dylan.
This one holds a lot of charm for me. Yes, again, from a sequence concept there's not much to it. The camera zooms out and that's about it. However, design-wise, I think it's quite beautiful. All the different multicolours featured here blend together so wonderfully, everything looks so visually appealing to the viewer, and the sort of handcrafted design is not only a visual stunner, but it also works with the new reworking of the music featured. So some may pass this by, but I honestly think it's one of the best Channel 4 Christmas efforts up to this point. Moving on, for Christmas 1993, a New York theming was adapted, and the following I'm showing you is 2 different variants shown during this festive season.
This is Channel 4. And now the Christmas in New York movies continue with Neil Simon's comedy of the small-town couple who take on the big metropolis. Jack Lemmon and Sandy Dennis are the out-of-towners.
The man with a recipe for love. It had to be Harry Connick Jr. in concert at 8:30. First on 4, there's an unwelcome knock at Anna's door in Brookside.
Despite my curiosity of the New York theming, this strangely works. Seriously, the first part of the decorations becoming out of focus to show the 4 numeral works a treat, and the whole handmade tree and Statue of Liberty not only shows some nostalgia of how 90s television approached its idents, but also finally helps prove that Channel 4 was prepared to make a decent effort with its Christmas idents beyond just slight alterations to the main sequence. The second variant shown adopts the same style, and the red hues work well design-wise, but I think I prefer the first variant with all its handcraft and extra details. So well done Channel 4, 1993 was a winner for you. Let's see how they followed this up the following year, during Christmas of 1994. And this just proves we're back to old habits. So after 12 years, the same sequence of the 4 parts flying is used. When it forms, it freezes over, making it almost identically similar to the 1985 variant we saw earlier, albeit with the graphics looking a bit more updated and slicker. I can't believe that 12 years into their existence, Channel 4 was still happy to go from a year of detail and effort to just the same old stuff we had seen for years at this point. Sadly, a disappointment for me. So now, for our final ident of the day, let's see if Christmas of 1995 can do anything to lift my spirits.
Now on 4, even Christmas is a busy time for the crew of the emergency room in a special Yuletide edition of ER.
Not perfect, but definitely a positive one to finish. This one borrows many elements of past idents whilst also adding something new. We see a silver star emitting multicolours, a staple of the 4 logo, before the 4 numeral itself appears and begins to rotate like a hanging Christmas decoration. Design-wise, I think this shows how brilliant a simple ident concept can be, and out of Channel 4's offering for the first half of the 90s, behind the 93 and 90 variants, this one places a solid third. Not the best Christmas ident I've ever seen, but one that has some strong detail, strong visual appeal, and some effort in it to ensure that viewers can still remember it, to some extent, to this day. Overall, I think the idents offered by Channel 4 from its inception in 1982 till the year before its first major revamp in 1995 show that a lot of offerings come across as being a bit lazy, as you've probably gathered. I don't know, some people like the fact that many are so similar to the main 4 sequence, but I just long for Christmas idents to go a little bit above the norm. Christmas time on TV shows itself for around a month, so for an ident not to give me something completely different to represent this season is always going to come off as a little disappointing. Nevertheless, there are a few hidden gems in there, which prove that Channel 4, like the BBC and ITV, were worthy contenders when it came to presenting idents for the public to soak up, enjoy and remember at Christmas time. And so we've come to the end, but before we go, the final words from our broadcaster.
This Christmas Eve, Channel 4 has variety and style. At 2 in the afternoon, a series of lively Christmas cantatas from 18th century Spain, Los Villancicos. At 6, we travel far into the future, where 3 boys set out on a dangerous journey to face a dark enemy. While Marty has to face his best friend's wife in the mating call at 8:30.
What did you do to Joan?
What did she do to me? She robbed me of my manhood.
Ah, petty theft.
And at 9 o'clock, a look behind the scenes at a year in the life of one of the world's greatest opera singers, Plácido. Plácido, just one of the highlights for Christmas Eve here on 4.
That was all this week for this instalment of the Ident Review. I hope you all enjoyed watching it, and we hope that you tune in next week. Due to other commitments behind the scenes, the regular programmes should hopefully reach you at their usual days and times, but if they do not, you now know why. But we will always do our best to get them to you, as your support is always appreciated. But until the next time, have a good week, and we hope that you join us again soon. Good night.
Ident.